So much. That was such a thorough introduction. I don't think I need to say anything else. But I'm just going to go right into it. Hopefully I'm to share my screen. Great. Please let me know if there's any issues with it, but are we good?
All good, Ali.
Okay, perfect. So we're just going to get started with a little bit about me and my story and really why I was so drawn to be someone as a young person trying to create change within our policy and our systems. I grew up as a child from a displaced family. I come from former Yugoslavia, and growing up, I really did not have that support system. For such a long time, I thought if I was thinner, I'd be happier. And instead, I developed an eating disorder for over 10 years. And living with that was incredibly difficult. My hair was falling out. I had heart palpitations. I barely could walk up a flight of stairs. And life was very, very challenging for me. And I couldn't speak about this to anyone. My family, they came from that very traditional Eastern European background, so mental health was something that I did not talk about growing up. And medical practitioners saw a diagnosis. They didn't see me as someone suffering from a disease. And this left me incredibly alone and vulnerable. And when I couldn't get help from the external world, I really tried to find that from within. And I started to explore my experiences and process them through painting. And from there, I realized that I had this really unique insight into what I want to share with people about what it's actually like to live with an eating disorder. So from there, I started the Starving Artists, and the Starving Artists itself is an initiative that uses art as a way for us to address our mental illnesses, such as eating disorders and body dysmorphia. We do many things, but as young people, it's really focused on creating art and initiatives that focus on addressing really the voices behind the numbers. So we do art research, publications, workshops, and collaborations with treatment teams and even with education institutions. So really trying to explore more about how can we contribute our youth voices to these conversations pertaining to mental health. Especially when it comes to art and activism, I think it's really been neglected from our conversations around youth work. Often art is an accessory to these, I would say, these big campaigns and these big policy reforms, but really art has been able to help redefine and change the way that we're looking at these conversations, especially coming from people who have autoethnographic experience. So it means that people with this lived-in experience being able to contribute as researchers and as voices is very important. Especially with our work, the beneficiaries are twofold. First off, people with lived-in experience of eating disorders, body dysmorphia, and mental illness get to see their voices and struggles authentically communicated. I'll talk more about what that means later, but really what we're saying is that people have been really excluded and isolated about what it's actually like to endure mental illnesses. Often there's stereotypes or limited representation, and what we're trying to do is expand that through the power of creative voices. But also it helps those externally. So it helps people, one, better understand what their loved ones are going through, but also helps them broaden the understanding and learn more about how we can support those within our community. Just to give a little bit more background on eating disorders in particular, because this is a very, very important aspect of my work. Often we have two very limited perceptions of what eating disorders are. So on the left-hand side, you see that very stereotypical high school student, and she's depicted as a young white Caucasian female, and she's trying to lose weight for prom or your school dance. What we see in movies and TV is her working out on the treadmill, eating carrot sticks, and really it's just a superficial way of looking at anorexia. And then on the other hand of the spectrum, we have someone who's seen as too large and has no control around food, and it seems as someone who's being overindulgent. The problem with both of these representations is that it's highly limited, and especially for young people and families and pretty much everyone within this community, we need to broaden our understanding of what mental illnesses are so we can have more authentic ways that we can actually help and treat people. Growing up, I knew that 1 in every 10 people had some form of an eating disorder, but I always thought it would be someone who looked like me. But growing up even more, having conversations with people, you realize that there's a whole entire aspect of mental health that isn't actually being addressed. We don't talk about how race, ethnicity, disability, intersectionality of mental health conditions all can impact the way that people are experiencing eating disorders and pretty much any other mental health condition. We view mental health illnesses through very narrow lenses. And when we think about youth work and youth policy, we need to first off expand on these definitions. And the way that I've been trying to do so is through art. So one way that I tried to do this is by showing, I think, those neglected conversations. When we talk about, or even if you hear someone within your youth group say that I was so tired and mentally I was crying all night because I couldn't process schoolwork or I had some family situation, you understand what they're going through, but you don't feel it. So art is a way that we've been able to show really that suffering that people are going through behind closed doors. Art, I think, can help people relate both on an emotional and empathetic level, but I think also to better understand deeply through, I think, the power of visual narratives. Especially when it comes to eating disorders and mental health illnesses, it's often very strict, and I think there's a clinical practitioner who's someone who's basically saying, here's what you should be experiencing with your illness, and here's the way that we're going to be treating it. But they don't really understand the individual voices of those suffering. So within my art and pretty much the community of the starving artists, we try to show those hidden moments. For me, especially in my younger years, I was dealing with a lot. I had my parents who were getting divorced. I grew up with a very dysfunctional family and school, and I had to work 2 jobs, and life was really, really stressful. So for me, every single day coming home from school, the one thing that gave me comfort was eating a box of Cheerios. Hopefully you guys have this here in Scotland, but it's just this really dry cereal. But it doesn't matter, because to me in that moment, the Cheerios were the one thing that gave me comfort and control. And when I couldn't control the world around me, I tried to seek that from within. So really just trying to show how mental health illnesses can actually be portrayed in a different way. So looking at this euphoric moment of eating Cheerios taking me away from my daily life. Another key aspect is looking at how youth can be influenced from, I think, our current media perception of mental health illnesses, especially within the age of Instagram and TikTok. We're often shown a lot of different types of, I would say, ways to address our mental health illnesses. So I was really trying to lose weight. And I thought that, okay, I'll take this green tea pill or a metabolism pill or another pill to help with trying to boost cardiovascular system. Whatever it was, I was just trying to consume it because I didn't really know what type of support to get to actually address what I was going through. And then I had to take more types of pills, ones to help with depression and stress and anxiety. And I couldn't process it all, and I really became consumed by it. And as you can see here in these paintings, popping pills, popping bills, the whole entire focus of these paintings is to show how young people can be drowned and really lose control within all of this. Especially when we don't have proper support in place, it's very, very difficult for us to, I think, be able to find our voice and find our way to navigate our current landscape. And so just going through some ways that the starving artist has actually been able to help redefine within, I think, our current systemic work. Some of these are exhibitions, so we're able to bring art to the forefront of our conversations through having both my voice, young people's voices, voices from different cultures, all be able to have a space to facilitate these conversations. Art is one amazing way to do so because it's a very safe and secured environment. We're able to have entry strategies, event strategies, and post strategies to help make sure that people are able to have these difficult conversations with a supportive system and, I think, network in place. I think, especially when it comes to youth mental health, we need to be as vulnerable as possible, and art is an amazing way to help, I think, break down those first barriers. Art has been, I think, also another way that we're able to address beyond, I think, the gallery walls, but instead it's also been able to help with, I think, different aspects. So sorry, let me explain more. On the top hand, you'll see that art has been a great way to address cross-cultural differences. So art is one thing that doesn't really require to have a strong understanding of a different language or culture. From there, you have this visual piece that is the basis for conversations. So we do a lot of work with migrant communities, refugees, and people who really don't have that same education background. So art has been an amazing way for young people all over the world to be able to find their voice and contribute to these conversations. The same thing when I've been able to work with politicians in the past. Art helps give that voice behind numbers. And when politicians, and I think a lot of us, are designing policies, we kind of lose that aspect of who we're looking for and how we're trying to help them. So art, I think, better helps understand these voices and makes us more, hopefully, humanizing these issues that we're trying to address. So while this talk is very brief, I really just want to highlight a couple of key things. First off, we shouldn't shy away from art in our health treatment, especially when we're trying to design policies for mental health. I think we should be looking at alternative perspectives and ways that we can address diversity of young people's needs. When we're looking at mental health, we should be handling it with the utmost care, especially with antiquated models of looking at treatment, diagnosis, and looking at recovery treatment plans. They're not always the same for everybody. I think by highlighting that we should have a diversity of experiences and voices included in these conversations, we're better able to effectively support different individuals and their needs. The last thing within this key slide I think is really important to highlight is that young people and just people in general with mental health illnesses, just because we have a label, it does not make us disabled. We're still very much able to effectively contribute to healthcare and to our own communities. So we should not be neglected from these conversations or tokenized. Instead, we should be able to bring our voices and our contributions to the forefront of these conversations. Now, especially when it comes to policy, we should focusing on hopefully more so empowering people with lived-in experience to have a platform and be able to contribute in a diverse range, from the initial conversations to being able to look at policy reform and to be able to continue monitoring and, I think, updating as need be. Another key point is that I believe that we should be highlighting the current work that young people are doing for young people. Often funds go towards established large-scale organizations. And while that is very helpful, it's not the only way that we should be looking at empowering young people and supporting young people. So we should be able to find more spaces, strategies, and I think solutions to really focus on the great work that young people are doing. Another point I want to raise is that we should foster funding towards the current initiatives. So these ones, especially by young people and the ones within our own communities, looking more so at the scale and try to, I think, help us in what we're trying to do. There's lots of amazing organizations, but without the support and funding, we're unable to get that outreach. Even within eating disorders, I just want to highlight that in Scotland, even within Glasgow in general, there's only about 8 beds for people with inpatient treatment and for anorexia. And yet there's over, I believe, 40,000 people within Scotland that are dealing with some form of anorexia. And when there's very, very little space and very little support, often it ends up falling through the cracks and people suffer. So I think highlighting the fact that we need to be more proactive with our youth policies instead of being reactive. And the last thing is looking at more alternative approaches to youth policy engagement. As you can see from my work, is that art is one way that we're able to do so and help empower young people to find their own voice and address their own mental health. But I believe that I'm just one voice, so we should be trying to look at a diverse number of ways that we can be continuing these conversations. Thank you guys so much. I won't take too long because I know that the schedule is tight today, but again, I'm here to help and answer any questions.